listening? Damn. Yeah.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Damn Podcast. I am your host, Angie Machado, publisher of BeaverBlitz.com, part of the 24/7 sports network of sites. Joined with me, as always, is our fearless beat writer down in Corvallis, Jake Hedberg. Jake, tough night on Saturday, but how are we doing today, Monday?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Pretty excited to get to head back home on tomorrow afternoon. Excited for what appears to be the last edition of the Civil War on Friday.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. We're going to actually talk about that a little bit. Civil War. Well, we're going to talk about the Civil War game a lot. I do want to kind of touch on the potential for a Civil War down maybe in the future. Some kind of new things being brought to light here that I've been hearing about today and late last week. So tough loss for Oregon State. But the atmosphere, even if it was pouring down rain, it was good. A quick rundown of the show. Jake and I are going to break down that loss to Washington, 22-20 on that loss to the Huskies. We're going to dive in and look at the Pac-12 as they did as a whole. We're going to preview the Civil War and then get to some mailbag questions. We actually had a special guest lined up today, and it was a player, and he let us know that he got injured today at practice, and he will not be able to join us because he's in X-ray. So I'm not going to divulge who is going to join us, but just know that we tried, and Oregon State's kind of beat up right now. So let's just start. Oh, and then I also have a really, really cool promo to tell you guys about if you're not members of Beaver Blitz. I'm going to probably hype it a little bit more than normal, but just so you guys know, tonight, Monday night at midnight, we flipped the switch for our 75% off Black Friday special. So if you're not a member, now is the time to jump, or tomorrow is the time to jump on and get that full year membership for under $27. Best deal you will see all year. And I know several have been waiting for this deal. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. If you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat and Jake and I'll get to them. But let's just jump right in. 22-20, Oregon State fell to the Huskies. Big game. I mean, it had that big game feeling to it. Kirk Herbstreit, Chris Fowler were in attendance. Jake, give me just kind of your off the cuff feelings on that loss.
It was definitely a tough loss. It was a very winnable game, I thought. I thought that Washington didn't necessarily win the game. I feel like Oregon State had opportunities to win, but they failed to capitalize on them. Whether that was due to play calling issues or just execution. There was room for improvement where if Oregon State did a few things a little better, then I think Oregon State would have won that game. On the bright side, I thought Oregon State's defense did fantastic. They became the second team all year to hold Washington to below 30 points. And really they shut Michael Penix down. He had a completion percentage of under 50%. He did throw 2 touchdowns to Roma Dunze, but as a whole, I thought Oregon State did very well, particularly in the second half defensively. Shout out to 2 true freshmen, Andre Jordan and Jermod McCoy. I thought they both played fantastic going up against, arguably the best receiving room in the country. And they held their own. Jordan, Jermod both had passes broken up. Really excited about those 2 futures. And the offense side of the ball, I thought Damian Martinez overall played his best game. While statistically it may not have been, he ran the ball, I thought, the hardest he's ran all year. Highlight plays, a spin move, just absolutely trucking a Washington defender. But the negatives of the game, I thought the downfield passing game struggled, which we really it hadn't ever really been great this year, but it hadn't been this poor. I don't believe Oregon State had a completion on a pass that traveled longer than 20 yards through the air. And then the offensive line, which we have seen under Coach M and Coach Smith really be the strength of Oregon State and really defines the brand of football that Oregon State wants to play. I thought they got outplayed. The Washington front seven they did tremendous. They had 7 tackles for loss, which was the most Oregon State has given up all year. And really, for the strength of Oregon State's team to lose that battle, I think was one of the differences in Saturday's game.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit about that because we all season and then leading up to this game with Washington, all talk has been around Washington's offense and their potent offense. Did their defense looked pretty solid. I mean, did that surprise you?
Yeah, it did, honestly. I wasn't really buying Washington's defense. They hadn't played poor, but they hadn't really played spectacular either. And a guy that I was really impressed by was the cornerback, Jabbar Muhammad. Oregon State could not throw the ball in his direction. He had countless passes broken up, 2 interceptions, and really he was a big part of the reason why Oregon State couldn't push the ball down the field. And then their front 7, I thought, played well. They held Damian Martinez to Damian did play very well, but his average yards per carry was relatively low to what it has been. So credit to the Washington coaching staff for executing their game plan. And I honestly thought Oregon State executed their game plan the way they wanted to. They controlled the football. Well, I think the time of possession was like 38-22 Oregon State.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Which it didn't seem like Washington. I think Washington had maybe 3 or 4 possessions in the whole second half. But Oregon State just couldn't execute on that final drive.
Yeah, I mean, if you would have told me that Oregon State had close to 8 minutes down by 2 to just get down and score a field goal, I would have said I like the chances, and they just couldn't make it happen. So yeah, Martinez had the most carries that he's had all season.
I think in his career too.
In his career, yeah. So and we only saw 3 carries for Fenwick?
3 for Deshaun Fenwick, 1 for Isaiah Newell.
Okay, so it was the Damian Martinez show. DJU, I thought, ran the ball pretty well too.
Yeah, I think that was the most effectively he utilized his legs all year. Excuse me, a little cold. The yards after contact, I thought from DJ was huge. There were multiple instances of him being hit, behind the line or a yard or 2 in front of the line, and then breaking tackles and picking up yardage to gain a first down. Which really, I'm expecting the coaching staff to utilize this some more against Oregon this weekend.
Yeah, no, it was. I thought DJ did an amazing job. His best run of the night came though, and then it was negated by I thought questionable. I went back and rewatched it. A questionable holding call that they called it back.
Was that the one on Jake Levengood?
Yes. Yeah. So that wasn't. There was a couple interesting calls. You and I talked to each other during the game about the penalty yards were very similar.
Yeah.
But it did seem that Washington was getting some really timely calls, I guess I should say, to either extend drives or shut down the Beavs. It is what it is. I mean, I think this whole season, Oregon State's known that they're going to have to fight for what they get, and they just didn't execute enough times on Saturday, especially against a good team. I mean, Washington is a solid team. It's going to be interesting. The defense, like you said, what do you think needs work on the offensive side?
The downfield passing game. That to me, you can't win the game being one-dimensional. And Oregon State, for the most part, they didn't have much of a downfield passing game at all, which was a reason why Oregon State lost games last year as well. Obviously, DJ's been much better than Gulbranson was last year, but if that's not fixed against Oregon, I don't see Oregon State beating them.
Yeah. I mean, we've had this 2-week span kind of highlighted for the whole season. This is a 2-week pretty brutal span for Oregon State. Do you think it's more route running? Do you think it's play calling? Do you think it is just the receivers not getting separation? What do you think is the biggest culprit here?
I think it's a mixture of all 3 of those. The play calling at times was a little suspect on the last drive, especially.
That has taken a ton of discussion in the Lodge League. Yeah. That last drive and the downfield passes.
Yeah, for me, what had worked for Oregon State was running the ball with DJ and Damon. They tended to steer away from that. I get passing on 1st and 10, but if there is an incompletion, then I don't understand throwing it again. because the downfield pass game hadn't worked all game, and now you're instead of giving yourself a 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, picking up half of that on a run, you're throwing another incompletion down the field, which just sets you up for really what happened at the end of the game, which was a fourth and 5 that Oregon State couldn't convert on.
Yeah, it was, and it's totally deviating kind of from what Oregon State has done in the past. So
and through the passing game with the personnel wise, separation has been an issue against more physical corners. Silas Bold and Anthony Gould are 2 great receivers, but they are small guys, and playing against more physical corners like Jabbar Muhammad, there is potential to not get that separation that they would usually get with their speed. And I think we did kind of see some of that in the second half last night or Saturday.
Yeah. And the rain, I think, had a part too. But
yeah.
I mean, and hats off to Michael Penix, because he really is the real deal. He's a solid quarterback. And
tough
like you
place
said, Roma Dunze.
Yeah,
he delivered. The crowd. Hats off to Beaver Nation, because you guys were loud and it was pretty ruckus in there. But no, it was. I thought the defense actually played one of their best games. Like you said, no, they didn't allow a score in the whole second half.
Tackling was the issue in the first quarter, but after that, I thought Trent Bray got his guys ready to go. So do we
know? So you mentioned McCoy and Jack Conne came in, and Andre Jordan came in. So 3 young guys, two freshmen, and then a younger guy, Jack Conne. Do we know, was that scheme or was that because of injury that those guys came out?
Yeah, so Jaden Robinson and Achille Arnold both suffered injuries in the third quarter. Are yet to get a definitive answer. Coach Smith was a little vague during his press conference. But if Oregon State does not get those guys back, they could be at a huge disadvantage this weekend. Oregon is fantastic throwing the ball. Bo Nix is a legitimate Heisman Trophy contender. Troy Franklin's a great receiver. Tez Johnson as well is fantastic. And if Oregon State has those younger guys going up against those talented receivers, they may not necessarily play as well as they did against the Washington guys. However, I do feel like Coach Blue and Coach Perkins have really drilled this, next guy up mentality in, and I think these guys are going to come out prepared and ready to play.
Yeah, I do too. I think, you and I, we've talked all season and before the season began that was a area of concern, was just the secondary as a whole and then depth at secondary. And what we're seeing is, we're seeing especially Jermod McCoy grow up in front of our eyes and very quickly, because, some of those young freshmen I've seen over the years as watching Beaver football have taken their lumps those freshman year and taken a year or two to get their feet under them. So he's growing up quickly. And, but you're right. It's next man up. And we did. Hanelli Bloomfield looked to suffer the most serious injury of the game. He's out. Poor Jake. You get the flat flu?
I think it's from being out in the rain on Saturday. Yeah.
Here's a comment in the chat. I was just going to pop up. Back to the offense. What is it? Backmaster 984. DJ's timing was late on the outside patterns and throwing against their best corner. Yeah, I thought he was a little late too.
I think one thing that could be credited to is the Washington corners jamming the Oregon State receivers and, not letting them get out their breaks as to what they normally would, which does throw off timing and would explain why his timing was so late.
Which is why I'd like to see more slants and quick, a little more fly sweeps. And you guys hear me every single year. It seems like I kind of harp on that, but okay. So the injury update that we know. So Levengood is back, or he was back for Washington. Yep. We did lose Bloomfield. He will be out. And then we saw Flavio Gonzalez come in for him. Grant Stark, what's the latest on him?
On Stark?
Yeah.
Coach Smith said optimistic. We shall see what that entails on Friday.
Optimistic and day-to-day. Those are kind of Coach Smith's two go-tos.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think we see Stark?
Not much of a tell. I am more confident that we see Stark than a Achille Arnold or Jaden Robinson. One thing that is a little concerning is Stark didn't even go through warm-ups. He did practice today lightly, according to Coach Smith, so hopefully that can get ramped up. So he's just ready to go on Friday because Flavio Gonzalez, haven't really seen him a whole lot, don't really know what he brings to the table. And to make your first career start at Oregon in a hostile environment is a tough test for anybody. So hopefully
against
start
a top 10 team. So that's he better be ready to go. Akili, we did see on the sideline with a boot. That, I mean, it can be serious and it can be a sprained ankle that they just want to try to heal quicker. So we'll keep you posted if we hear anything. But I have a feeling this week is going to be pretty quiet as far as injuries go, not to give too much away to the other team.
Another thing that kind of stands out to me in terms of injuries is the secondary. If you look at it, they're the only one of their starters entering the season that is truly fully healthy right now is Katana Oladapo, because Skylar Thomas tore his ACL. Tyrese Ivey out for the year. Ryan Cooper's been banged up all year. Achille Arnold's now banged up. Noble Thomas, haven't seen him in a few weeks. Alton Julian's out for the rest of the season as well. So really, those guys were considered their main 7 heading into the season, and only one of them is fully healthy.
Yeah, and Jaden Robinson too.
Yeah, and Jaden Robinson is banged up now as well. I forgot to say him, but really, Catan is the only fully healthy that we're aware of. He could not even be 100% at this point in the season.
Okay, speaking of Catan, I mean, amazing story for him.
Yeah.
How about that play where he ran down? I mean, saved a touchdown and punched that ball out early in the game.
That was huge. I mean, he saved a touchdown there. Unfortunately, Oregon State couldn't capitalize on that as they gave it right back to Washington. But to make that kind of play, chase a guy down and not only tackle him, but give Oregon State the ball back was huge. I thought it could have given Oregon State a ton of momentum and I think was on track to until the fumble occurred. Great play. I'm glad Catan could go out there and make a huge play in his last game. A kid who's really been with Coach Smith since day one. And really, in my opinion, is one of many great former walk-ons that have had success at Oregon State.
Yeah, and you could tell he was the first player in post-game to do interviews, and you could tell that one hurt. He was pretty emotional, and you could tell he really wanted that win. And that one's going to weigh on him for a little bit. But big game for him. Like I said, the whole defense really played stellar. And just you think back to the over the head snap punt, long snap. There was a couple, surprising. I mean, I think when you break down that game, I mean, playing a team like Oregon or like Washington, a top 10 program, the key there is Oregon State's going to have to play near flawless. And to see the mistakes that were made, and I think what was uncharacteristic about Saturday night was those plays were by some of the, veteran leaders. Anthony Gould fielding a punt at the 5-yard line. Later in the game, or the high snap over the head that led to a 2-point safety. Levin Good's holding call. There were a lot of
as well.
There was some uncharacteristic. Gould fumbled a play too.
I feel like that's his first career fumble. Don't remember him ever.
Yeah, and I guess emotions could be in a play. It was rainy. The weather. It was cold. But it was just Oregon State can't. I think there has to be the positive in that is that Oregon State, even with these mistakes, they were still fighting and they were right in it, right in the thick of it. It's just a matter now of getting over that hump. They have lost their 3 games by a total of 8 total points. Heartbreaker right there. 8 points separates Oregon State from 8-3 and 11-1.
11-0.
Or 11-0. Sorry, 11-0. Wild. Okay, so we're going to have a special guest. We're going to nix that for now. Hopefully soon in the next week or two. But let's talk some Pac-12. This is a chance during our show. Here we have another. Matt Schiaffoni says, reminds, I think he's referring to Catan Oladapo, reminded me of Al Afalava in 05. Good call. And actually, Catan plays a lot like Al.
He plays very physical. Yeah, very physical.
Okay, so Pac-12, the week that was, Colorado got worked by Washington State. Did you watch any of that game Friday night? You were probably. I watched the first half. Washington State looked. about as good as they did when they played Oregon State.
Yeah,
Complete game for them.
I thought defensively, the Brennan Jackson with 2 fumble
Yeah.
recoveries for touchdowns. That doesn't happen a whole often.
Yeah,
So
2 scooping scores for
impressive,
it was they Coach Prime, I guess, had the flu, and it was
too with
Shador's just been hurt,
going
and he just
down.
keeps getting
He's
hurt.
banged up. And for me, just that offensive line is so bad. I'd feel like they're a line. I feel like Colorado is another transfer portal class away, like it or not, from being a bowl team. If they go out and get their guys, then they could be a team to watch in the Big 12 next year.
Okay, but do you think this is going to be their answer for them to keep going to the portal, or do you think they're going to at some point need to build around what they have?
Well, I think their plan right now is the portal. Just if you look at their recruiting, they really don't have a whole ton of commits. I again think Dion is going to go to the portal with guys. He's going to get guys out that didn't perform or guys that would just, like it or not, it's what he's going to do. I don't necessarily agree with it. I don't believe it's the right way to build a program, but that's it's where all their best players this year came from. And there's going to be guys that want to play for Coach Prime. There's a lot of attention around it, a lot of glitz and glam, and he's a Hall of Fame player. So I'm expecting them to hit the portal pretty hard.
Do you think, just kind of sticking in that line, do you think Coach Prime bolts and goes to one of these open jobs that'll be coming open here at the end of the year?
That's a good question. Have heard his name to A&M. I don't necessarily think it'll happen. I think A&M wants more of a win now with a more proven coach than Coach Sanders. Whether that's Kalen DeBoer, Dan Lanning, James Franklin, or Mike Elko. I see Dion leaving Colorado eventually, just not to a Texas A&M school or to a school like Texas A&M. I feel like he's going to head back to Florida or Georgia schools where he's more comfortable.
Okay, I want to bring this up because we're going to jump here. Sorry, we have a comment here that I want your thought on. Nathan Kerr in the chat says Beavers should have jumped or had let UW jump on the ball in the end zone after the high snap instead of the safety. They get 7, but then Oregon State gets the ball back instead of giving them 2 and then the ball. Monday Night QB. What is your thought on that one?
I disagree. I think the right play was to give Washington 2 points and the ball. Oregon State's defense played well. I don't think Washington scored on the drive after the safety. I feel like it's better to give the opposing team 2 points and your own defense a chance to go out and stop them than to just hand them a free touchdown. I thought it was a very smart play from Josh Green. Savvy. It was a veteran play. I think it was the right play. Ultimately, that play cost the Beavs either way, but taking the 2 points or giving away 2 points and taking the chance to stop Washington, I like that better than giving them a free touchdown.
Okay, I actually agree. Statistically, that's the way to handle that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so back to the Pac-12. This one surprised me. The outcome didn't, because I thought Arizona would beat Utah, but the way it happened, 42-18.
This game was never close, too.
No, it wasn't.
It was a surprise for me. I checked my phone. I saw Arizona up 28-0. I was, wow. I was expecting it to be a closer game. I also did think Arizona was going to win the game, but for them to come out and really just stomp Utah, which not a whole lot of teams do, was really impressive. And this team's proved that they're a legit contender.
Yeah, I was going to say. What are your thoughts on Arizona? Do you think? Right now they're basically 3rd in the Pac-12.
I think Jed Fish is the Pac-12 coach of the year. I don't think anyone's done a better job. And they're in the Pac-12 championship game if Oregon State beats U of O on Friday. So I know all the Wildcat fans are going to be pulling for Oregon State, but for what they've done with since Noah Fafita took over has been incredible. Yeah, they've lost 2 games with them, but they lost to Washington by 7 and they lost SC by 2.
And double overtime.
If I think they played SC right now, I think Arizona rolls them.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. Very impressed with what Arizona has done. And again, with Utah, without a quarterback, just so tough to compete in the Pac-12. Cam Rising is coming back for I want to say his 12th year next year. So
He's on the Jaden Grant plan.
yeah, so I think Utah will be a much improved team next year.
So UCLA knocks off SC in the Coliseum 38-20. You think that saves Chip Kelly's job for a year?
I don't, to be honest. I feel like the UCLA people have had enough of them. I was a little surprised by this result, but again, with USC, it's just so much talent, but the coaching is just not there. For them to have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback and just the amount of talent they have, for them to be 7-5 is inconceivable.
Yeah.
And
even with a poor defense,
yeah,
they still have talent.
And their defense has looked bad ever since they fired Grinch. So was it necessarily a Grinch thing?
Well, what surprised me more about this score was the 20 points. They have an electric offense, and they still only put up 20 points.
They have the Heisman Trophy winner from a season ago.
Yeah.
2 good backs who got shut down. And then Brendan Rice, Taj Washington, all these stud receivers, and they're out here scoring 20 points in the Rose Bowl. Or I guess it was at home.
No, it was at the Coliseum.
20 points in the Coliseum. It's mind-baffling, and I think Clay Helton's record through 2 years at SC has been better than Lincoln Riley's.
Yeah, well, and that's something interesting to think about. I know UCLA is their boosters and things are all hot for Jonathan Smith to go after him. Chip Kelly has a better record than Jonathan Smith right now. They're like neck and neck, right at 500.
They're both like 34 and 34. They're both there.
Yeah, it's crazy. You can say all you want. I think UCLA is a bad job, to be honest. I mean, every time UCLA has an opening, it's, oh, we have so much potential. Okay, They've brought in coach after coach after coach. They also have no money, and they can't sell out the Rose Bowl. So
yeah, I don't think UCLA is going to be a huge contender in the Big Ten at all. I feel like they're going to be more like a Nebraska team where they're 4-8 to 8-4 every year, fighting for bowl eligibility.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, and then we have Cal-Stanford, the big game. Cal knocks off Stanford 27-15. Not a huge surprise there. Yeah. And then the Washington OSU game. Jumping ahead, it's a week of rivalry games. So we have the Civil War, Oregon State at Oregon. U of O is currently, as of this afternoon, a 13.5-point favorite. Does that feel right?
I feel like it does. Oregon has been, in my opinion, Oregon's the best team in the Pac-12. They are loaded with talent. And in years past, coaching has been an issue for Oregon. I feel like Lanning's the best coach they've had since Chip Kelly. This team's very talented, very experienced as well, which I feel like is not touched on as much nationally. But, Bo Nix is in his 5th year as a Division I starting quarterback. Most of their starters are second and third year starters. And I do feel like this spread is right, playing at home against an Oregon State team that is coming off a rough loss. They're beat up. They're banged up. It's going to be an interesting game to watch. I'll talk more about that game later on. But
Colorado, Utah 22-point favorites. It's in Salt Lake.
Yeah, I don't really know what to think about this game, to be honest, just because Colorado's defense is bad, but Utah's offense is really bad too.
Yeah. Might be a good matchup. You don't know.
It might. I mean, if Shedeur Sanders does not go, I do not see Colorado putting up a single point against Utah. I think Utah wins. I don't even know if they score 21 points to cover that spread.
Yeah, it's a strain. I don't know what to think about that one. Arizona is at ASU. Arizona is an 11.5-point favorite. That feels probably right. Yeah.
Yeah. I have Arizona big.
Apple Cup. Washington State at Washington. Washington is 16.5-point favorite.
Yeah, I would love to see Washington State go out there and spoil the Huskies season. And they're fighting for bowl eligibility too. So this could be a huge game for a lot of reasons on the Washington State side. But Washington, too much talent. Michael Penix, Roma Dunze, I see them having huge days, and I think Washington wins. I think Washington State comes out inspired and maybe keeps the game a little closer in the first half, but I think the Huskies pull away in the second half.
Notre Dame travels to Stanford, where the Fighting Irish are 26-point favorites. Yeah, that's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, it's going to be a rough end to the season for Troy Taylor and the Cardinal. I think Notre Dame doesn't struggle in Stanford at all.
And then we have Cal at UCLA. UCLA is a 9.5-point favorite. This one
is intriguing.
Yeah, this one could be an interesting game.
This, in my mind, outside of the Washington State game and the Civil War, I feel like this is the most intriguing Pac-12 game. Cal with the win is going bowling, which could be huge for Justin Wilcox. There's been rumblings around. I'm not sure how concrete any of that is, but hasn't experienced a whole ton of bowl game success there. And for them to get there would be huge. I think their quarterback is really good, Fernando Mendoza. He's really come alive ever since ever since playing against the Beavers. I think Cal wins this game, actually.
Okay. I think this one's going to be a really good game to watch. Okay, so I didn't put it on a rundown, and we're going to take a quick break for the podcast side, but I do want to talk, maybe we'll talk after Oregon, but I want to talk a little bit about the Pac-12 realignment stuff that we kind of talked about in the Lodge late last week. But I do want to talk about that a little bit. Matt Schiaffoni has asked a question in the chat as well. So we're going to take a quick break for the podcast. So if you're watching us live, we're not going anywhere. We just have to take a quick break for when we pop this on the podcast. But I do, again, want to remind all of our listeners, if you are not a member of Beaver Blitz, starting tonight at midnight, it runs for a full week, Tuesday to Tuesday, the 28th. You can take advantage of our Black Friday promotion. It is our best promotion all year. You get a full year of Beaver Blitz for 75% off. It is, I think it's $26.85 for the year. If you are currently a monthly member, you can upgrade on this deal. And if you're currently an annual member, then you move to the full price, but you get the full Paramount Plus subscription as well. So there's benefits all the way across the board. So make sure, if you're not a member, or if you know someone that maybe would be a great gift, let them know and join us in the Lodge. We would love to see them, but we'll be right back to talk some Ducks, mailbag, and realignment. Okay, we're back after a quick break. Let's talk some Civil War. We've talked Pac-12. We've talked Husky loss. This one's going to be tough. Jake, you were just talking about that you think Oregon is playing the best of anyone in the Pac-12. I know earlier in the season, you and I both thought that was the Huskies. I would tend to agree with you now. Oregon, top to bottom, just looks like the most complete team in this conference. Bo Nix is playing very well. Bucky Irving. They've got some receivers. So just going to throw – what concerns you about Oregon?
Really, most people would say their offense. I think their defense is really good, okay. Which they're giving up 310 yards a game just about, which I believe is best in the Pac-12, giving up just under 17 points per game. And they've got some studs defensively. Brandon Dorless, the defensive end, he's going to be an NFL player. The secondary, Kyrie Jackson's a guy, Alabama transfer, who has been pretty impressive this year. And then Evan Williams, a safety as well, is very solid. Their defense is very good. And then on the flip side, their offense, their skill players are legit. They have two good running backs. Bucky Irving might be the best back in the Pac-12. I think it's between him, Jaden Knott, and Damian Martinez. Jordan James may be the best complimentary back in the country. He's electric, scores a lot of touchdowns. And then receiving, Bo Nix has some studs to throw to. He's got his adopted brother, Tez Johnson, a transfer from Troy, who's been fantastic this year. And then Troy Franklin, I think he leads the Pac-12 in receiving yards and touchdowns. He's been incredible this year. He's a legitimate contender for the Hnitnikoff Award. Some solid tight ends as well with Patrick Herbert and Terrence Ferguson. The offensive line's been pretty solid as well too. This is a very well-rounded team, complete team, and there's really not a whole lot of weaknesses at all.
Yeah, and one thing I remember talking about in August was my question mark with them. One of my question marks was just how well this coach, excuse me, this coaching staff was going to do bringing all these 5-star, 4-star egos, everything together. They've done a pretty solid job. I
Yeah.
mean, so hat tip to them on that. So just a few stats for you guys. Oregon is averaging 47 points a game, and they're giving up an average of 17. Passing yards, they're gaining 350 yards through the air while giving up 214. Rushing, however, they're rushing for 197 average per game and average giving up 96. I think Oregon State rushes for more than that this week.
I think they do too.
Sacks against, they've only given up 5 sacks while giving 31 sacks.
Yeah, I mean, pound for pound, this may be the best offensive line in the country. It is a legit O-line. They're very well coached.
Mike Kavanaugh's one of their coaches.
Yeah, he's the offensive line analyst. He's not the official coach, but he's
familiar face for you, for Beaver fans out there. And then Bo Nix. I mean, like I said, the guy looks like he's 40, but he's been there for a while. But
I think he might be the Heisman front runner. Quite frankly,
he's getting shit done. I mean, he looked great against Sun Devils. Now, you can say what you will about their schedule, maybe not being the strongest, but again, like Washington, they're winning, and unlike Washington, who's eked out some close wins, Oregon's blowing people out of the water.
All their wins have been pretty convincing. They haven't played. Texas Tech was a close game back in September, and then the Washington loss was obviously a close game. I think if they play Washington in Austin, or if they play them again in the Pac-12 championship, I think Oregon wins. Quite frankly, really, I think Bo Nix is top 2 Heisman Trophy race right now. I think it's him and Jaden Daniels. Nix has been fantastic. 35 touchdowns to, I believe, 2 interceptions is mind-boggling.
That's crazy.
Those numbers are crazy. He's done a fantastic job taking care of the football. There's going to be very few opportunities for Oregon State to capitalize on Bo Nix made mistakes. So if he does slip up and make one, Oregon State needs to capitalize.
Yeah, and last year he was hobbled in the Civil War with kind of that ankle sprain. I think he's healthy this year. What are your keys to the game? If Oregon State has a shot at this, what does Oregon State need to do?
I think it's more of the same from last weekend. They need to control the ball, control the clock, take it away from Bo Nix, and just grind the ball out with Damian Martinez. I think Oregon State's game plan should be the same, quite frankly. And I think if they execute it, they have a chance. As you saw last year, Oregon State can run the ball on Oregon. They did it last year 19 straight times, and we all saw how that turned out. I would expect Oregon State to rely pretty heavily on the run game again, especially if it's a close game towards the end of the game. I think they may have learned their lesson from trying to push the ball downfield against Washington. And if they are in that late game scenario, I would expect to see a whole lot of Damian Martinez.
Okay. Defensively, what does the Beavers need to do?
Slow down slow down the Oregon skill players. It's going to be a tough challenge, especially in the secondary. If Jaden Robinson's out, if Achille Arnold's out, then guys like Jermod McCoy, Jack Conne, Andre Jordan, these young guys are going to have to step up and shut down some really good players. Some guys like Troy Franklin, who are going to be a day 1 or day 2 NFL draft pick here in a couple months, they're going to have to go out there and shut them down, which is a tough task.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy, but
you're
telling me there's a chance.
Yes.
It's going to be a big week, so there's lots of discussion on Beaver Blitz right now, and being Civil War week, there's always good jokes and there's always good stories. So
great stories.
Make sure you jump on over at Beaver Blitz and join in on those stories and jokes, because it's always a lot of fun. Let's talk a little bit about the whole Pac-12 realignment, because it kind of came up again this last week. Oregon State, Washington State got the ruling that they wanted. However, it's been put in a stay while the Washington Supreme Court examines it. So the Pac-2 does not have complete control yet. We're waiting to see what happens with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's looking over the ruling. Oregon State and Washington State did on Friday receive word. They put in a a request that it be expedited because the transfer portal opens December 4th and they need a ruling before that. So that was approved. So we are still a couple weeks out potentially from that ruling taking place. But the big news I thought last week when this all happened was the national media jumping on the narrative that that Oregon State and Washington State were running to form an alliance with the Mountain West. National media is hearing this narrative. I am not. I am hearing that, yes, we will see some Mountain West schools in the schedule, but Oregon State will be playing a more independent schedule. The kicker here, and the thing that Beaver fans and Washington State fans need to keep an eye on, is this whole scheduling alliance that Gloria Alvarez and the Mountain West are trying to get done would basically hamstring the Pac-2 to having to absorb the entire Mountain West Conference at the end of that 2-year independent period. Cougars and Beavers do not want the entire Mountain West. That is like a reverse merger. They would do that now. This is worst case scenario. This is not the plan. So what I'm hearing is, as of right now, this is kind of what Oregon State's trying to get done. You'll see one FCS school, which most likely is Idaho State. They're already on the schedule. They've been on the schedule for years. We're looking at 5 Power 5 schools and 6 G5 schools. Do you have
Does
something?
Washington State go down as one of those Power 5, or would they be?
Yes. Washington State would be
Washington
one.
State and Purdue.
Washington State, Purdue.
And then Boise State would be one of the G5s.
Boise State would be a G5, potentially looking to add, so the idea here is, and then I've seen it, well, would we play Oregon State and Washington State twice? No. What we'd play once in the regular season and then once in the title game, Pac-2 title game. It's a balancing act right now because scheduling is hard a year out, not even a year out, 9 months out. But you're also trying to build a schedule that will give you a decent enough strength of schedule that you could potentially get into a playoff scenario. So there's a lot of moving parts here. And we're going to jump into the mailbag here in a minute, but Tyler Staub on X, Twitter, said, question for the pod. How do you both feel personally about continuing the game with the Ducks after this year? A lot of Beaver fans want to wash their hands of anything to do with the program down the road. Jake, what's your thought?
For me, they're very mixed feelings. Part of me is, just kind of like the whole screw them, where why should we go play them? However, if they come to Corvallis and we're getting money out of it, then I feel like it might not necessarily be a bad thing for the state. In terms of recruiting as well, it's another opportunity to play a game in the Pacific Northwest or the West Coast, which could go a long way. Very mixed feelings on my part. Not really sure how I feel, quite frankly, but.
So let me tell you this. So Beaver fans, and I think we were all kind of in agreement in August. And I think it was kind of this unanimous F them. I mean, that's for lack of a screw them, as Jake said. So, but now as we've moved a little bit here with all these moving pieces, there is a potential to play Oregon on September 14th if Boise State if they're going to move their game with Oregon. So there's some moving pieces here. Oregon wants the game because they'd like to have, a game that they're not traveling clear across the country. Okay?
Yeah. In my mind, if the game's in Corvallis, then I'm all for it.
Yeah. And I have not heard that but I do think they're going to try to potentially keep this, we just saw the Apple Cup has been signed off now for another couple years.
5 seasons, I think.
5 seasons. But where this comes into play, and this is where I had my mind changed this weekend, is this whole strength of schedule deal.
Mm-hmm.
A, for recruiting, because you want recruits and your current team to be able to play against good competition. And B, you need strength of schedule for the rankings and potentially to make it to the CFP. Those are kind of the two big areas. And so that, when you look at that, then you're like, okay, that makes sense. Another team I'm hearing potentially on the schedule or that they're working toward is Cal. So try to get Cal on the schedule. Utah is another team that could be. So we could be seeing some other former Pac-12 opponents. Utah does have an opening, I know, on their schedule. Like I said, Cal, they're working through some things there. So just keep your eyes open. That is what I'm hearing. And not to say that, my sources are pretty dialed in, but this is still a very moving parts deal. What I have also heard, though, is Coach Smith is very much in the know and in the planning of this and knows what the plan is going forward. And so and that they also plan to announce the schedule within the next 2 weeks. And we should have kind of word on that before portal opens. Stay tuned. There you go. I've had more discussion and more insight that I've put in the Lodge at Beaver Blitz. So again, another reason to get over there so that you can kind of read more of the insight and what I'm hearing. But that's kind of the 10,000 foot level of what we're hearing. And poor Jake had to walk with me through the stadium parking lot on Saturday and talk about it a lot. Let's see. Rip City actually says, I know a lot of people don't want to play the Civil War, but I feel we need to play it and to keep some sort of tradition going. It will never be the same, but it's something. And yeah, I hear it. I mean, that tradition, and think about that, you know, the homeless, the independent team, Oregon State playing Oregon early. What I don't like the idea, though, is if Oregon State is not able to, you know, if they're not able to control the finances and they don't, you know, if Oregon State's trying to cobble together a schedule and has a very small budget, I don't like that idea. It's not a fair trade. I think right off the gate, though, 2 years, if they're able to keep coaching staff and players for the most part, it could be a good point for recruits and for the program. That's what I'm hearing. Okay, so let's jump into the mailbag. That was a good question. Jake, do you have any other thoughts on the whole playing Oregon?
Nope.
Okay, I do think the other sports will be playing a lot of the West Coast.
I know basketball said they are planning on once in the non-conference, and then I'd imagine baseball, just because of the whole how convenient it is. I'm expecting them to keep playing in baseball.
But Jake, part of you don't you want to just be kind of like you said, screw them? Like, why make it easy on them?
I mean, it's also a good opportunity to go out there and beat them again. So, yeah, especially in like baseball, where we can just dominate them every year.
True. I mean, very true. Okay, so not a ton of questions today. We've had a couple questions in the chat about the bathroom situation at research. So there was that viral video, and I don't know if it was a Husky fan.
It looked like a Husky fan.
That's what somebody said.
I'm also hoping it was a Husky fan.
Yeah, somebody said it was a Husky fan. Basically, the fly right in the middle of the concourse. So you and I, we're up in the press box. We don't really have an issue, but I've heard from so many friends and my own kids that the bathroom situation is horrible. I guess today Kimya Massey was on Joe Beaver show, and they did say they did a walkthrough today.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, all the guys I've talked to said this could all be, I guess, in the men's room down on the new side of the stadium. It's all just, there's like 5 stalls.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
I think it could be, didn't the old stadium have like the trough thing that you could get like a bunch of guys in at once? And
on the old side, there's plenty of urinals, plenty of stalls, whereas the new side. But yeah, Kimya came on the Joe Beaver show right after I did this afternoon, and he kind of just went over some upgrades or some new planning that the athletic department is looking to establish onto RESA for next year. The show should be available on Spotify tomorrow if someone wants to hear that interview of Kimya.
Yeah, because poor planning. Very poor planning.
And again, I really don't think they really knew how many people would kind of flock over there. I think that's the reason why there were as many seats that looked empty on the old side as they did, is because now fans can just walk around and get to Beaver Street, where the view, in my opinion, is much better. You can stand, but it is very hard to navigate there. I tried to go down there to see my grandparents, and I walked around. I walked like 270 degrees. I tried to walk through Beaver Street to get back up to the press box. I had to turn around and go back the other way.
It was so busy.
It was so crowded.
So what about the old news side? Is it easier to navigate over there?
It's very easy. I mean, it was this last weekend. At least just the walking area. I haven't really been through the
back concourse,
the back concourse with all the concessions, but haven't really I actually didn't go back there at all this year, so don't really know how that was. But
Rip City said that I was in standing room on Beaver Street. Bathroom situation was not great. Also noticed a ton of trash and bottles more than normal. So another piece that people were talking about in the lodge too that I hadn't thought about is Oregon State closed reentry. So I think a lot of folks that used to run out at halftime to tailgate a little more would use the porta potties out in the parking lot.
And
now
with trash too, in terms
and the
of
trash, yeah.
they would drink
now
more outside, whereas now the fans are drinking at the game, where it creates more trash because they get more drunk at the game than outside, and it just kind of spirals from there.
And but again, I think this is all stuff that needs to be discussed. I mean, there's we were talking about Josh Pate from Lake Cape. Josh was at the game on Saturday. And he'd asked me, and we have this discussion going. I saw somebody ripped it off, a Duck fan ripped it off and screenshotted it and put it out on Twitter about the food situation in the press box. And look, I don't care. I bring my own or eat at tailgates. But the Josh Pate comes up to me before the game and says, "Hey, when do they put out the pregame meal?" I'm like, "Well, they don't. No pregame meal at Oregon State. They give you vouchers if you want to go down and eat at the concession stands. Which, when you're trying to do your job, to have to go navigate the concession lines, it's not easy. So there's a lot of things that they're cleaning up, I think, with the concession stands. I mean, the sound system. But again,
as well
with Oregon State, this is a prime opportunity for them to really kind of set a really positive example, whether that be not trash not everywhere, or people peeing on the concourse. I mean, this is kind of it's embarrassing, but it is what it is. I don't think they maybe necessarily realize that many people are going to be there. And then, like I said, the reentry makes a lot of sense where there's not the reentry. So now in the past, you've had all these people leaving at halftime. Now they're sticking around and filling facilities and trash and everything else, and eating at the concession stands. So interesting thing, but we'll definitely keep an eye on it and talk to, there's the good news is there's 9 months for Oregon State to fix these issues and make them better. So hopefully they will be on top of that. Some recruits on campus. Jake, have you had a chance to touch base with recruits yet? That's on your agenda.
I got in touch with 4. I've gotten in touch with 4 of the 5 that are taking officials. Peyton Stewart, who's committed, and then another 3. Sounds like things went promising. They had 2 edges, an inside linebacker, corner, and then Stewart, an offensive tackle, all officially visiting. Sounds like things went well, and we are expecting, the recruiting to pick up here after this week, especially with the transfer portal. There's going to be Oregon State's going to be looking at the portal, I would imagine, to get some more experienced players. So I would expect the roster additions and departures to start to ramp up here in the next week or so.
Yeah, it's going to get crazy. So, there's no downtime, Jake. This is your first season here. So we go right from, you're thinking end of the season. We get a couple weeks before bowl game, but no,
basketball.
We go right into basketball and actually recruiting. So signing day will be the 20th.
December 20th, the Wednesday.
So this gets to be go time now. So our podcast after next week is going to be really heavily focused on recruiting. We'll talk some bowl game too as we get ready, but there'll be transfer portal and departures, and also then signing day and all that goes around with that. So Coach
Smith did say in his press conference today that on Monday they will start their meetings. So I would imagine you may see the portal from Oregon State, and in terms of departures, you may see that start to ramp up on Monday.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, Coach Smith will meet with every single player on the roster. They do their exit interviews and the position coaches. So they kind of get a chance to find out where they're at, kind of in the what they need to improve upon. And sometimes those are hard conversations. If Oregon State's able to, if they're saying, we love you, but there's really not a place for you as far as contributing, those are some conversations that get to be had as well. So Reeser Beef 23 said, assuming Jonathan Smith comes back, do you expect more attrition from our assistant coaches than normal?
This is a good question. I would not be shocked. I'm really not too sure what to expect, but I would not be shocked at all if, we saw Coach Blue get picked up, Coach Waz, Coach Fence. I'm expecting Trent Bray and Brian Lindgren to be heavily pursued for, in Lindgren's case, maybe a Mountain West head coaching job, or in Bray's case, maybe a bigger program's defensive coordinator job. But it will be interesting to see how Oregon State attacks this and deals with this, because these coaches are going to be heavily sought after this offseason.
Okay, so let me just ask you right now. You have a set number. Coach Scott Barnes comes to you and your Coach Smith, and he says, "Here's a pool of money." But all your assistants are kind of up in limbo. Who do you make sure gets that money and you keep them no matter at all costs?
Trent Bray, Jim Mahalchek, and Brian Wozniak are my top three that really come to mind. I think all Brian Wozniak has done at tight ends coach is recruit well and develop kids into NFL tight ends. The three tight ends he's coached that have started in Hoatongiai, Tegan Kitoriano, and Luke Musgrave are all either on an NFL roster or on a practice squad right now. And Jack Velling is next. He is going to be a heavily sought-after tight end. Schools are probably going to try and convince Velling to transfer, and he's going to be sought after in the 2025 draft next year. And then Coach M has done a fantastic job. As we all know, he's turned the offensive line into an annual contender for the Joe Moore Award. Really one of the best units in the country year after year. And then what Trent Bray has done as the Oregon State defensive coordinator has been phenomenal. And you can bet that there will be big level programs that pursue him. And Oregon State needs him to stay.
Yeah, I would agree with you on the two, on Bray and Mahalachek. The third, I like what you're saying, because I do think Coach Waz is probably one of the best recruiters on staff. I do want Beaver fans to know, too, that it is not a bad thing when these assistants move on. That's and this is how my opinion or my thought process goes on it. Is you bring in these young position coaches and you want to develop them because that means they're doing a good job if you're winning and guys want them. But they're easier to find. You can find young, hungry position coaches a lot of places. In my opinion, since Coach Smith is an offensive guy, and if Brian Lindgren goes to be a head coach, I don't think that is as big of loss as if Trent Bray were to leave. So I think you need to keep Trent Bray. And then, like I said, Coach Mahalachek is kind of the elder statesman, I guess, of the group. He brings
he's
a lot of
coach, isn't he?
I know, and he's not even that old,
yeah,
but
55, 60.
But he has so much experience. I mean, he played for Coach Erickson up at Washington State. He's been in the NFL. He's been at Cal. He's been all over Arizona State. He was at Arizona too, wasn't he? Yeah. So he brings a lot of knowledge from that end, and I just think he's that steadying force and a good maybe sounding board for Jonathan Smith. Even though now Coach Smith has kind of got his legs under him and he's like a veteran head coach now. He's not even like a new guy anymore. So
sixth year.
But that's I agree with you on that. That those are kind of you cannot lose. We have some more comments here. Joe Swaim says, in my opinion, we never recovered from losing Omar Spates to LSU's big bag of NIL money. I actually thought Calvin Hart did a really good job.
Yeah, I think Calvin Hart's been playing his best football as of late. Easton's been solid. Tackling's been a little bit of an issue, but overall, I think the inside backers. I actually think Jam Griffin's loss has been more detrimental. Which, if you look at it, Jam has 6-7 carries at Ole Miss, which it's a little interesting because he would have got that in game 1 against San Jose State, I think. But I mean, you can't really blame him. He's expecting a kid.
Baby's on the way.
Baby's on the way, so you can't really fault him for that, making a decision that's best for himself. But I do think Jam's loss is hampering the Beavers more than Spates necessarily is.
Yeah. And Joe Swaim also, with our short outside receivers, I'm surprised we don't run more screens and reverses. Freaking men. You missed earlier, but that's what I'd like to see more slants too, but get the ball. And then I've preached this before, and Jake's heard me, is those guys are going to battle sometimes, off the line. But if you can get the ball in those guys' hands in space and then let them go to work,
then they're dangerous.
So hopefully we see a little more of that. Get the ball to Ant and Silas, get it to him in space, and run the ball. Okay, so that pretty much does it. We have wrapped up another episode of the Damn Podcast. Again tonight, midnight. If you're not a member of Beaver Blitz, this is the time to join. 75% off. A full year Beaver Blitz for under $27. I think it's $26.85 is what it works out to. So join Beaver Blitz. Jake is doing a tremendous job. I think he set a record for one day articles yet last week. So
I tied it because
you tied it.
they never made the post-game press conference for basketball available. So I tied it. One short.
Okay. Well, we've got a big, busy couple months for you. So join us in the lodge where all the good discussions happen. Until then, I'm Angie Machado. He's Jake Hedberg. Have a very happy Thanksgiving with your family, and we'll be back next week for another episode of the Damn Podcast.